Hello and welcome. I'm Cliona Foley and this is Off the Bench, a women's sport podcast which we hope will educate and entertain people of all ages and genders. You can find all our previous editions on offtheball.com. Go into the podcast section there and all our previous editions are there, and also on iTunes. And we also have a Twitter account. We don't have Facebook, but we have a Twitter account, and it's at Off the Bench OTB, capital OTB. So if you have any suggestions or any feedback you want to give us, we'll take them there. One of the reasons we set up Off the Bench was because so many issues in women's sport and about female athletes actually don't get decent coverage in the general media. And we felt this is really certainly the case recently when new proposed rules for Camogie have come out. So because of that, we brought in three people who know a lot about this actually, as players and as administrators as well. And we're going to find out what are the new rules, what do we see potentially as problems with them, or what's great about them, and let's talk about them, because one thing that hasn't happened so far is that they haven't been thought about. So on my left, Kate Kelly from Wexford, legendary player, 9-time All-Star, already arguing with Liam O'Neill, former GA president, and he's had a very important role in this that we're going to talk about. And on the end down there, 2013 All-Star, Chloe Morey from Clare. So it's a frosty morning. They've come all the way up from the country. Really appreciate it. Welcome to Off the Bench, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Great to have you here. Liam, you have an important role in these new rules for a very interesting reason. You were the chairman of the rules revision group that looked at, sent out questionnaires, got feedback back, and then made proposals, which the Camogie Association then took away, looked at, and then came out with a set that they wanted. So maybe first of all, would you tell us who else was on the Rules Revision Committee, and what was the process?
Okay, so we were put together early in the summer. We had Mary Lacey from Wexford, Anne-Marie Hayes from Galway, and we had Vanilla Carr from Down as the players.
Yeah.
We had Dr. Siobhan O'Connor from DCU. She specialises in female sport and injuries and general well-being.
Yeah, exactly. Particularly health and high performance sport.
With Kevin McGeaney, who was a referee assessor in the Camogie Association.
And your own. We were laughing. First of all, tell us, how many sisters have you got?
I had 7 sisters. I grew up with 7 sisters.
And what did you just tell us before we came on air?
I had 3 above me and 3 below me directly. And I had 4 brothers apart from that. But the one thing I learned from being surrounded by girls was, when, as a little boy, you see, when they cry, you're in serious trouble.
I like it.
Yeah,
that was a very valuable lesson to learn.
Absolutely.
But also, when back when you were a teacher, obviously retired now, but when Common to Munskill started in Laois, which is where you're from, the first actual Common to Munskill in Laois, you told me you set it up for girls.
Yeah, we set it up for Camogie because boys' games were taken care of by the juvenile board, as it was called at the time. But in 1988, we set up the Common to Munskill as a teachers' body. And it was one of the first ones founded around the country, and it's sort of in a really organised way. But 4 years previously, we had set up Camogie Common to Munskill because it was clear that there wasn't activity for primary schools. Camogie. So we said we'd do that, for girls.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is you know women's sport, you know Camogie, you've obviously had an interest in it, even apart from being president of the GA for a term. So tell us about how did this system work in terms of how did you get people's opinions on where we were going with the rules, and how much feedback did you get from people?
Okay, well, our modus operandi was first that we were there. We had that group with Paul Donovan servicing the group from headquarters. He's player welfare officer in Croke Park.
Yeah.
So I said I was going to chair it. I was going to listen to the people on the committee and see how we could get a move towards change. But I did set up my stall early on that I think we were originally told 3 changes. But I said we weren't going to waste our time.
Only
3. I think that was involved in the motion that went to Congress.
Right.
But we said we weren't going to sit around for months discussing 3 changes. So I said we're going to have a look and discuss the broader game and see how it might affect players from day one. So we have a couple of recommendations there for underage players as well, which aren't being trialled obviously in the National League. So we looked at it from day one, and we decided that the group decided that they'd send out a survey, Monkey.
Yeah,
it was called. We had about 1,500, short of 1,500 replies to that.
That's a lot. Emails. I'm really impressed by that. 1,500 means people are really interested, because a lot of questionnaires you would get a very small percentage to reply. 1,500 is good. It's good feedback.
It's a representative sample. So it gave us a bit of courage to go push ahead and suggest change.
Right.
Because you're always worried when you're working with an organisation that maybe hasn't a reputation for trying out new rules and trying out new things, that you're doing something different from what they want. But we said we'd have a very open discussion, so we got responses back on that. We offered an email address as well and got a good few responses by emails. We went out and met people too, people who had an interest in camogie, some camogie coaches, some former players, and others volunteered their opinions to us, which is great. So we knew after the first meeting or two that we had the basis of what would be, we felt, a useful report and some changes that might just work and might just improve the game.
So you said to me when I rang you initially, but you said about 2,000 people gave feedback, and I just thought, well, that was great for a start. So people were interested. Did either of you, Kate or Chloe, did you have any input into it, or did you fill out a questionnaire, or did you do it in any other format?
No, I filled out the questionnaire and I also attended the forum earlier on. And
good woman, Kate, you weren't missing your chance.
No, I think it's a great process, and I think people are enthusiastic for the change and to see the game evolving, and it has moved a lot. So I think this is very welcome among a lot of the players out there.
And what about you, Chloe?
I did. I filled out the questionnaire. I made sure to put every opinion I had in it into it. But I also actually probably previous to that, I think it was just before Christmas or maybe just after it, the WGPA, kind of chaired by Aoife Lang, had sought out the players' opinion on it to see, is this something maybe that she'd like? So she had actually, I think it was over the course of 4 or 5 meetings, we had a few meetings, different players around the country actually. I think one meeting there was 8, another there was about 20. So we met up 4 or 5 times just to discuss the rules, and I suppose as reps as well, we had to see what your county team, is there any feedback?
What the feedback was for them. So to explain to anybody who doesn't know, the WGPA is the Women's Players Association, Women's Gaelic Players Association. So they actually made a submission as well, didn't it? So they all made and contributed to that, and then they made an official... Yeah,
we actually literally had the rule book up in a PowerPoint, and we were asked to go through it, and we actually discussed it in length. There's 2 or 3 hour meetings there. So, but I suppose it's really important that we did have the opinion of a lot of our team. It wasn't just my opinion on something. We were bringing opinions of, for me it was the Clare Camogie team, but they're really beneficial. So I think we had submitted it, we had given a report of some sort.
They did, and the WGPA actually released their findings as well from the players, and that's why today this panel, Liam represents the group who did the research, Kate represents former players and also has people who really have long since called for change, and you represent the current players and people who are actively playing the game now. So that was the process, and I noticed the questionnaire was really interesting for people just to know this. The questionnaire basically asked had 4 sections, very simple. What was the best way to speed up the game? How would you make the game more skillful? A question I'm not sure that you'd ask men, but that was the question that was asked. What rules do you think need revising, which is very general and can be thrown out to, to anything, encompass anything, and any other comments. So in other words, it was a very open process and people could throw their weight in behind anything. Liam, as somebody who heard all and saw all the research coming back, what would you say were the maybe 2 or 3 areas that kept coming up time and time again for you?
The message seemed to be that they wanted more contact.
Right.
And we took that on board. But we had then to turn to our expert and say just how much contact is fair and allowed. And we're conscious of the fact that we were talking about contact from girls who are quite young when they're allowed to play adult, and how that might impact on them, because a teenager is a lot different from a fully grown adult.
We were talking about this. How young were you when you started playing senior inter-county camogie, Kate?
15. Chloe?
15.
Same thing. And you're not allowed to play senior inter-county at that age and boys. So the rules for women sometimes vary for this very reason. And I know people on the contact rule, I came across people who are really vehement saying you can't add contact in because then you're going to have young teenagers at club level even playing against much bigger women, and it's an area of question. So we'll talk about that one. But contact was one. Anything else that kept recurring that you saw, you just could see it recurring?
Dropping the hurley and the hand pass goal. They were clear messages from day one.
Right. Yeah. Kate, why do you think people don't like the hand pass goal and dropping the hurley?
I think it's a distinct difference between the men's game, and I think maybe they feel that we don't need it, but I believe it's a skill in itself. So it's
the hand pass goal.
Hand pass goal, yeah.
Really,
it's not used that often, and sometimes it pushes them to just kick the ball if there's no other alternative. And but it's always been a bone of contention, and I'd say mostly for backs, to be honest, because it is a hard one to defend.
It's really hard to defend.
So
Leaves you very exposed. Yeah.
So in the research side of it, I wonder, was it mostly backs that said they wanted to get rid of it, and mostly forwards?
Yeah, I bet
it's a tough one.
Yeah. And Chloe, what about you? Would they have been the two areas for you, contact and?
I'm a big, since day dot, physical contact. I could never understand how we weren't allowed shoulder. I suppose I grew up playing with the boys, as did most Camogie players anyway at the start. So, it was always bone contention, and maybe just because I'm probably more physical than I am anything else when I try to play.
Yeah.
So I always be given out to refs. But the best thing for me was doing this review, because I actually understood how hard it is for refs to interpret the rules. And when we're talking about now contact and shoulder, the only kind of bugbear I would have is the definition of minimal, because my minimal would be very different to Kate's, which would be very different to someone else's.
Well, we'll actually go through them in detail, so we'll help. But it is really interesting what you say, because I know a lot of the time as journalists we don't know the rules very well, and sometimes as players and as managers, people we don't know. For example, I thought it was really interesting, Liam, you got feedback on the 2 points. You had people suggesting that the sideline cut should be worth 2 points. It already is.
It is. And people didn't know that.
There you go.
But I think in a major game it's only been done once or twice. So it hasn't been, it's not...
It's not prolific. It's
not prolific. No. But it has been allowed. I think it could be 2012 it came in. It's certainly in a while. And it is interesting. That just shows you sometimes just the gap between people's knowledge of rules and what the actual rules are. People were suggesting to you that should be changed. It's already in the game. Yeah. So let's have a look at them then. They were the ones that jumped out, Liam, and they were the consistent ones. But G had other suggestions. But we'll look at the 6 that they've decided to change. So these rules are coming in, and just to explain to people, they're only being used on a trial basis in 2020 in the national leagues. They're not coming into club level or anything yet. There's no need to worry about them or panic about them, but that's where they're coming in. But we can look at, have people already got enough time. First one was contact. So now the new rule says you can make minimal contact with minimal force from side on once you're making a reasonable effort to gain possession of a ball. And I was just looking at how your recommendations, Liam, which is that it would be a bump or a nudge, right? And it's not a shoulder. And that's specifically because of this worry about the rule being applied to teenagers playing against seniors, young, smaller, much smaller women potentially playing much stronger. Is that
it'll become more apparent how that wording works when the trial takes place, and that's why the trial is so important. It's very difficult when we're involved because there is no legally defined tackle in hurling, football, or camogie, or ladies football.
And as players, it's what makes it so hard, isn't it?
But there's a reason for that. It's quite difficult to do.
Yes.
So when we started this process, we were doing something that hadn't really been done before. So we're trying to define it, what's allowed. And you have to have it tight enough that it allows for a little bit of physicality, as Chloe wants, and that it also takes care of safety. So we took a fine line, and when we're asked about it, we say, everyone knows when the ball's thrown in at the start of the game, there's contact. That's side on, it's side, and nobody's in any danger. So it's that type of approach to it that we were trying to promote.
But it's not a shoulder, and that's what people have to remember. Yeah. It isn't defined as a shoulder. It's defined as minimal force from side on. How do you feel about it, Kate? What do you think is that good? Does it go far enough, or do you have any potential worries about that?
I had a potential worry nearly opposite to Chloe, that they'd bring in a shoulder charge. Purely for the reasons what Liam is saying, for the younger player coming in, the game would be, the skill and the discipline within the game would be diluted. I think that's an important aspect of our game, is the skill. But I think the biggest problem with the old rules was it specifically said no contact.
Yeah.
And I think that was very, very hard for referees to referee, to distinguish, because we can't play the game without any contact.
That's the problem, isn't it? You can't actually tackle without any, physically very nearly virtually impossible.
So I think if the only thing that you're not allowed to do now is run across the field and specifically shoulder charge someone, I think that will evolve the game hugely, and it will give the referees a lot more clarity about what's going on, because I've seen over the last couple of years the amount of people's interpretation of no contact, or there's allowed this and you're not allowed shoulder. But I think even to clarify the contact and the physicality within this process will hugely improve the game.
Chloe, any worries for you?
like, I could be totally off the mark here, but if a girl, I put it to you this way, like, if you have a young girl on the team, would you have her on the panel if she can't strike it off both sides? Like, she wouldn't be on the panel because let's say she wouldn't be good enough or she doesn't have the skill set for it. So, I mean, a young girl wouldn't be on the panel if she isn't strong enough, would be my take on it.
For a shoulder.
Yeah, because I'm not really, like, my only thing is, like, the safety. I'm not sure what part, like, if it's shoulder to shoulder, then it's woman versus woman. Like, it's not a man versus, I can understand what you mean that way, man, but it's woman versus woman. So I'm not sure where the safety thing comes in, because, I mean, you look at women's rugby or other very physical sports and they're doing just fine. So
you looked at other sports which I thought was interesting. So you looked at rugby, you looked at lacrosse, you looked at a few other team sports that had physical contact.
Australian rules.
And Aussie rules as well.
That's where the notion of a bump, but the bump is kind of it's different there. It can actually be quite rough.
I thought I looked at the reasoning behind it, and I thought the same thing. I'm trying to think a bit like Chloe, that you're not allowed to shoulder charge. You're not allowed to shoulder anybody in the chest. So there's not a safety concern there. And if it is shoulder to shoulder, I would be a bit like you. You can get different sizes of players, but you get that. Joe Higgins, you get that in men's football and hurling all the time. You get different types of players. But I think your reasoning is really interesting one, Kate, which is you don't want physicality to overtake skill in the sport, and therefore for you this is a better rule, which is an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think the clarity for the referees, like I do think there is an element there that we have to protect the player and we have to evolve, that we want everyone to be able to play, not just the ones that feel they're strong enough or feel that, they're struggling after a game to recover within 3 or 4 days. And that's both ends of the spectrum. I don't think that's just the younger player. I think that's the older player. I think that's the middle player. I think that's everyone. But I think there's a lot more to our game. There's discipline. Discipline is a big part. I think the skills of our game, that's the big part that I'd like to promote. I think our game is hugely skillful, and I think if the referees can get it right and the physical contact is interpreted right, I think there's enough in that our game can evolve for all those players.
It's very interesting, because I think Chloe does represent this generation who are so strong and fit now. They're like, we have the bodies, let us be more physical. But at the same time, you represent also brilliant players who say, let's not go too far in one direction. Yeah,
but you have to consider too that if you're coming from a county standard, you're getting the S&C, you're getting all that high level training and that, but you have to incorporate, what about our club player, what about our starting player, what about our social player, what about all those? So then you've a county player that's going back into a junior team and they're physically so much more well equipped because they've been part of a county setup with S&C and all that, and they're going back to play junior and they go shoulder someone that's in it for the social aspect. Like, you have to look at it from a broader scale.
It's really interesting. And I always think the problem with Gaelic games is that the rules are made and they have to cover everybody from senior inter-county down to the social player, and that there's such a broad spectrum there, Liam, even in men's sport. Absolutely. That's very hard to cover everything, isn't it?
We were conscious, Chloe, of the fact that girls are different. There's a kind of a contradiction now between boys and girls, in that boys are not as physically strong as they were 20 years ago because they're leading a sedentary life, where girls are bigger now, they're born better as part of the whole nutrition of the mothers. Remember, we used to look at the American visitors that came in the 60s and 70s are always bigger than our girls, but our girls now are tall and strong.
Yeah, this generation is certainly a bigger.
So we were conscious of that. But what I'd like to say, Chloe, is, we had to start somewhere. Now, we don't see this as being an end point, but this is the start of seeing how this will work out. And if the Camogie players find, or the Camogie authorities find, that there's room for extra scope, well, then at least the process has been started. You follow me? The worry in bringing in change is, if you go too far, it gets wiped out.
Yes, and everybody retracts and reverse, instead of bringing enough in that it will take off.
So
and
we're conscious
develop.
That we've defined it, and it's limited physicality. Do you know what? If it works out, that's more is needed. That's easy to tweak.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you too, and I think Chloe represents as well the worry that I've had from some people is what is minimal force and how will referees interpret minimal force, and that does sound like something that referees will interpret differently. And one of the problems people argue with is about refereeing in general in hurling or camogie is that it's not consistent enough. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that works out.
The last line of that is, once they are making a reasonable effort to gain possession of the ball. So if a referee interprets someone doing something that's unfair, that's not making a reasonable effort
to get the ball,
to allow the skillful person
as opposed to take you down,
then the line is drawn there.
Well, my only thing then, so if I'm shoulder or minimal contact to her shoulder and she falls over, but I was going for the ball, will the ref?
No, but we would hope not.
Yeah, so
that's
an education process for
that's
everyone.
what's to be discovered.
Yeah.
Okay. Look at that's even. I think this one is probably the most interesting one from everybody. From the players want to know about the contact one. It is going to be interesting. So minimal force from side on. Once you're making a reasonable effort to gain possession of the ball. Second one that they have decided to change the rule on, and this is on persistent fouling. So 2 deliberate fouls will be given a tick, and then the third foul merits a yellow. What was it before, Liam? I mean, how does this change? Because I can't see.
There was no means of actually doing it. It just wasn't
of somebody
mentioned.
who was persistently fouling. Okay.
Yeah, there was no penalty.
But did you not get a yellow if you
Not for fouling. You only got a yellow as far as I know.
was aggressive.
I've only ever seen if it was aggressive.
An aggressive foul.
Yeah.
So persistent fouling, so that could be anything, pulling the jersey, niggling, anything. So persistent fouling now gets a yellow. Gets two ticks for the first ones and then a third. You definitely will get one for a third one. So the idea was stop this persistent fouling, which we see in the game, I think, Kate, a lot now defensively as well. Like, because teams are so well coached at intercounty level now, they're coached to contain and retain, aren't they?
Yeah, and this one I think is brilliant because the frustration of being a forward or anywhere on
As
the
forwards,
field.
you two will appreciate
But you can do
those.
you can do a small foul and I suppose give a free for someone going through that doesn't warrant a yellow card, and they can do it time and time again. And there's nothing in the rules for the referee to. So I actually think this one again will improve this, the discipline within the game and moving the game quicker
and stop that constant negativity, Chloe, that forwards keep getting. That's those niggly fouls, and they're not enough to get a yellow, but they're stopping you all the time.
Oh yeah, even for everyone, I think. I mean, I've watched sometimes when it gets to the quarter-final stage, the refs are a small bit under pressure, I think, from assessors, and it could be something that it's not a yellow card. You wouldn't deem it a yellow card because it wouldn't be, it could have been the first or second foul. It wouldn't have been aggressive, but they probably are under pressure from someone in the stand, and it would seem watching on that wasn't a yellow card and they've been given a yellow card, so hopefully this, as Kate said, this can only be positive.
There was a couple of cases last summer I remember seeing in quarterfinals and semi-finals, and people went, that's not a yellow card, and then I was like, but they're persistently fouling them, so here's one. So I think there'd be a general consensus from everything I've seen and heard back from people, that's a great idea.
And it's important just to note that, you see, like in hurling, if you get a yellow, you could do something that merits a yellow card straight off.
Yes, you can get a straight yellow, obviously. But now,
but if you do that, it will be interpreted that if the next foul was an innocuous foul, it would only be a tick. You don't actually get the second yellow card. We've sent that message to the referees. We don't want people sent off for silly stuff.
Right.
Simply because you got a yellow card. The second yellow card
has to be a merited yellow card. Has to be merited yellow card.
We've made that point to referees already.
Right, okay. So this one I think is straightforward enough. A quick puck out. So the referee now blows to signal a wider score, and the goalkeeper can take the free out as quickly as they want, immediately back in play.
So you think that's simple?
The
referees have kicked already straight away. The first reaction of the referees was no.
Why?
Because they like the ceremony, seemingly, of lighting down the score, taking ages to do it, and then they like this thing of holding up the hand and wait till I get out now, because I'm the important person here, not the players. And that just drives me mad. And God, in hurling and in this, we want the game to get on. And if somebody is quick enough and bright enough to have the sliotar where she can get to it, her hurley organised, and particularly after a score, it's lovely to get the thing started. And what will happen then is people will scatter.
Well, the game
they know that they can actually get an advantage by a goalie who sees an opportunity.
And puckouts are so important now in the modern game.
Yeah.
I mean, they're one of the key tactics in hurling and camogie now is where you're placing your puckout. So this is, to me, but it's interesting you should say that goalies are delighted. Any goalies I've spoken to are happy out. So
and
you
don't allude to the game being quicker, more clever. Being smart about getting possession, getting down the field, and getting the score back if there's a score got. So
why hold it up really?
Yeah, well, no, I can't see. That's interesting. The only ones who complain about this, and if that is the problem, then take the scorekeeping out of the hands of the referee, take the timekeeping. All of those things could be taken down the road.
We made a point already, Cliona. If most, good half or more scores are from frees.
Yeah.
Now, if you know there's a free being taken, you have it ready, and you just get ready.
Yes, you already have it.
You back out as quick as you can because you know the puck is coming.
Yeah.
And what will have to happen here is to talk about referees' fitness, and wasn't always the fittest person in the world myself, and I understand how that works. But do you know what? If you have to speed up, it's the players' count. And if the referees have to sharpen their axe with taking scores and with getting out again, that's what they should do.
That's the way the game is going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you're training so hard, we expect the referees to be up to the same standard of fitness as well. So there's 3 already. 4th one now is a new rule about a free from the hand. It's only, as I understand it, Liam, I clarify, it's only if you were fouled within your own 45 metre. So and it's indirect, in other words, you can't score from it. So, and what I would say to me, it strikes to me as it's a defensive free can be taken from the hand. In other words, if a defender is fouled within their own 45, they can take the free from their hand.
But it's indirect.
And
that's why the idea of being back behind a 45, you're not going to get somebody,
scoring from that
range. It means that it's influenced the play.
Yeah.
It's not an unfair advantage, and it's.
So why are you bringing this in?
It's consistent with the second one on persistent fouling, because if say a centre back or a back of any sort is fouled coming out to slow down the game, well, she now has the opportunity. The player must get away, and she has the opportunity to pick out somebody who has already started running down the field. I think this is probably the potential really to speed up the game, make it a thinking person's game, and just take the shackles off the players. So now when you foul a back, you have to worry, where are the forwards on the opposition gone, and straight down along, if it happens in the mid sort of outside of 20, it's going to land seriously in danger zone for the team that has fouled, and it's going to make it a lot less viable to foul now.
Well, it's designed. That's
designed for that.
Chloe, what are your feelings on this one?
There's just, I suppose there'd be a few questions too. I've actually there's 1 or 2 challenge matches where they've actually trialled some of these rules, and
you've
so
actually
some of them,
seen it yesterday.
So there'd be there's 1 or 2 things. Let's say, how does a girl have to be a certain amount of yards or metres away before you, could I flick it to someone who's free beside me and get the game going, or does it have to be
10 metres, we thought?
10 metres, okay.
Your own player has to be 10 metres away.
Yeah, okay.
And then the opposition player, if I'm forward and I'm trying to slow her down because
it's the last minute.
just
thinking about that.
If she doesn't get away, you have the option, if it's really unsporting, and if she's clearly setting out to stop the free being taken,
brought up,
that can be a yellow card offence. If that's unsporting behaviour, that's like trying to block a puck out.
Yeah.
If you think it'd be reasonable now if someone tried to block a puck out, she'd get a yellow card.
Right.
But similarly here, because the idea is to speed it up, and she shouldn't have fouled in the first place. And it's not about her. It's
as
about
I
the
took
person
it,
she
Chloe,
fouled.
as well. Am I right in thinking it's designed really to stop that fouling persistently on defenders trying to clear a ball and get the ball out? So it's designed to stop that sort of negative play as well.
But it's the person that was fouled can
only the person fouled.
If someone else is going to take it, they take it proper.
Take it slow down.
Take the old free.
Take the old free. Take the old free. So. Okay, so this one is really one for defenders. If you're fouled inside your own 45, you can take a quick free, and there is obviously an exclusion zone. Yeah,
but it's also for attackers, because if you were behind in a game and somebody cynically stops your centre back coming out, you now have the option of getting a score back, because the person can actually take this free quickly, take it from the hand, pick you out, put it straight in your hand, you turn it, and you have a score.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's going to. I think it's going to.
It's an interesting one. I think it has the potential, definitely. I think to cut out a lot of. I would have said a lot of cynical fouling in from forwards as well. But it's your point as well. It's a tool to score more at the other end and to speed up the game.
But I'd be interested in the games you saw. I bet when the person was fouled, people were immediately excited, because where's this ball going to go? Whereas in a normal free, it's kind of everyone's waiting. It's
everyone stops. Everyone back in positions.
This now makes it
even as you say that, you're right. It's totally almost a different game in terms of speed. Even the quick puck out. So you had a midfielder go up score, but her player, who now she didn't follow her, but she's back there now, she's free almost.
Quick puck
so
out
it's constant movement. It's opened up a bit more. I know people were giving out maybe on social media about free from the hand, but didn't actually. If you think about it, it's actually a very good idea trying to speed it up.
Yeah.
But those were just 1 or 2 things I noticed.
Chloe, I think that a lot of people saw free from the hand and took it to mean an attacking free from the hand.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that the understanding has to be it's only people inside their own 45 can take that free from the hand, and I think that will come into the consciousness.
Yeah.
I think the other one people were worried about was if they were up near close to the goal, they could take a quick free from the hand. Defenders everywhere going, oh my God, see, is our lives not hard enough? So the dropping the hurley, fifth rule that is being proposed on a trial basis, again we stress this, is the old thing of being allowed to drop the hurl and hand pass a goal. That's gone. you're no longer allowed intentionally drop your hurl, and you're no longer allowed hand pass a goal. But you can hand pass a point, and you could always hand pass a point, or could you?
It's just you're still allowed to.
But you so rarely see hand pass points.
Very rare. I
And
think if
it's
you're in
so
that
rarely.
close, you're going for
Yeah,
goal.
exactly. Well, Kate, if you're in that close, if either you two are in that close, you are going for the goalie's head probably. But it's funny. This one seems to me to be very logical. But I had somebody say to me, Liam, they coach juveniles, and they said that they found with girls, not with boys, but with girls, that if they're close to the goal mouth, they're very reticent about belting a ball hard for a goal at a goalie, young girls. And they said they noticed there's a difference between them and boys. And I would never have thought of that. And they were worried that this rule then, if it came in at juvenile level, that that they wouldn't be going for goals. But they could always kick them anyway, as you said, Kate. So that the logic here is what?
Well, it's been tried out in National League.
Yes, only at senior
with
level to
adults
start.
in mind, really. But
Yes.
see, we've already we'll come to it later on, we've made some suggestions for underage camogie as well,
Yeah.
which won't be ever affect adults.
Right.
But I think that we have to, and that if that is the consensus, then what to do is to leave it for juveniles.
Yeah,
But
leave it,
put
leave
it in
it.
for adults.
Yeah, exactly.
We're
And am I
conscious that 14 is a kind of a cut-off point.
14, yeah, under 14 or under is kind of the cut-off point for juveniles. So both of you are happy, get rid of that. I mean, why was it such a bone of contention with you, Kate? Was it because it made the game look so different from the men's? Was it because it didn't allow, which I would have felt, it didn't train people to go for goals, to strike for goals from a very, when they start the game?
I think the hand pass goal was more that if you were in that area, you'd use the hand pass. I didn't think people automatically decided that they were just going to hand pass all the time.
Yeah.
I just think it was another option. And looking back over the games over the last couple of years, we haven't had that
There's
many.
very few of them now,
There's
actually.
very little hand pass goals, and I just think if you're in that close, that's the option you take. I think a lot of camogie players actually go to strike it as a first option if the option is on, and you very rarely get the hand pass goal.
So
And
would you kept it?
I possibly didn't
you?
think it was as big an issue, but I think it was more the difference maybe that people didn't like. And
Yeah, that it differentiated the game from the men's and sort of made it look like a lesser game or something. Is that it?
Maybe so. And the hand pass and the hurley around the field, I think that's a good one to bring in, because it's a bad habit maybe to get into, that
To
you
drop
drop
in
the
the
hurl
hurl.
in the corner
Yeah.
back or out around the middle, and to give a more direct hand pass or a longer. But
Yeah, and it's illegal. You can't drop the hurl in the men's game at all. So I think there's that thing in people's head that get rid of it. It makes women look as if there's an easier rule for them when they don't need it. Am I right in thinking that, Chloe?
Yeah, I think so. I think if, I know we're on about young girls maybe not wanting to belt it, but look at Shane O'Donnell for the Clare hurler. He's well able to, he's very tricky. Even Austin Gleeson, remember he scored that goal for Wexford. So, and just kind of taps it in. I suppose the skill with your hurley is pretty important. So, I come from forward and a back point of view, but dropping the hurley, I think, and hand pass goals, I think it's a good rule to try it anyway.
I think it's interesting, Kate. I think your point is an interesting one, that there was a skill in itself, if you like, and if you were in that close and it was very busy. But I always felt it maybe stopped girls from developing a real killer instinct at a younger age when they could hand pass a goal. Do you know that they had to be able to score with their stick? I think develops a load more stick skills.
Yeah.
So it'd be really interesting to see if we see it, or if anybody ever hand passes a point, because I don't know that I've very rarely seen a hand pass point. But you could always hand pass point, and again I think people don't even realise that.
Laura Mack for Clare did one time. She was battled up and she was actually, her back was to the goal. It was brilliant, and she
Reverse
popped up like that.
Actually, do you
over
know
the
what?
bar,
I think
yeah.
I saw one in one of the club games this winter where somebody reverse hand passed it over her back as well, which is a great skill.
Yeah.
And the last one that they're officially going with then is the penalty. So the penalty now, you can only take it against one defender. We're presuming it's going to be the goalkeeper. You used to be able to, there were 3 on the line before in the women's game, and the ball must be struck on or outside the 20-metre line. Any issues with this one, or do you think this is a no-brainer as well, Kate?
no, I think this is a good one. Yeah, I think we needed to move it on and give the advantage to the person taking the penalty. I think if you were true on goal and you were pulled back to take a penalty with 3 in, I'd say if you looked at the statistics, the advantage was probably with the defenders as opposed to the girls striking.
And that's the idea, I'm presuming, is it? To give the advantage to.
A penalty should be scored. That's what people expect. Penalty, and penalty
And it
is-
should be a reward, as you say, for somebody who was cynically fouled. It should be a reward for them to give them a good chance to
But
score.
we're very conscious of the striking from outside. 'Cause I didn't realise, actually, and I thought I knew Camogie inside out, that you're allowed to strike it from inside.
Yes.
And we for safety reasons, even in the adult game, we stopped that.
Yeah.
And with the boy being injured last summer with a belt on his chest, just when you're aware there's a danger, you have to take it into account.
Yeah.
And it adds nothing. I mean, it's working quite well. You just strike it outside.
And really
Around
clever
it, yeah.
penalty players, takers, and I'm not sure whether you do this, but the really clever penalty strikers, of course, lift it and move it about, at least 8 metres before they actually step forward and strike it. Yeah. They ruled that illegal in the men's game a couple of years ago, and they've got really, really, really strict on it. So they should be, the referees will now be way stricter on it, I'd say, Chloe. So there'll be none of that.
Oh, definitely.
What I used to call the DJ Carey penalty. You'd have it 10 metres before you'd even strike it.
Well, I used to take them, obviously, when with Clare, and I try to get as much as I can. Don't think to do it as hard as I can, but you probably, there's a little bit more thinking to now. You'll probably have to place it, but...
You'll have to lift it up now as opposed to forward.
Oh, no, but I definitely think it's a good rule, and it'll actually make it more interesting as well, one-on-one, and it's the...
And actually, I spoke to Aoife Morey, one of the best goalkeepers in the game, and as a goalkeeper, she actually said, I love this. Because now, she said, I'm actually being challenged. I am actually being challenged now. It's you and me, babe. It's on. Do you know what I mean?
Probably.
I've no security around me now. It's going to actually test my skills as a goalkeeper.
That's it. Like, and if there's too nearly on the line, which as well, it's like if you go for it, sometimes you can hit it after the person.
Yeah,
but now it's just you, so you have the whole goals almost to move yourself, if that makes sense. Rather than depending on 2 other people beside you if they're going to go as well.
Yeah. So she was saying goalkeepers will actually love this because everyone's got an ego as well. Do you know what I mean? Either an attacker, or a defender, or goalkeeper, and you want to actually see how good can I be here. So that's those for people now. Those are the experimental rules. They're only going to be tried out in the National League this year by senior inter-county players, and there are a series, as Chloe's already seen a couple of them, there's a series of challenge matches going on at the moment and will happen. The National League starts again on February the 1st and 2nd, and it's only these players who are going to try them out. Briefly, Liam, what interested me was, there was a couple of things, what else did you suggest that they didn't take on board, and any that you particularly thought they should have taken on board that you would have liked to have seen?
I'm disappointed that they didn't take on the sideline inside your own 45.
So what were you suggesting?
The suggestion was that inside your own 45 you could rise and strike. A sideline inside your own 45, particularly in underage and younger and in lesser levels than senior county, is a liability, and it leads to the often it doesn't go far enough to stop a ruck developing, and then you have a throw in, and then you used to have a throw in that could end up over the sideline. You ended up throwing it again and again. It's held up. We thought, in keeping with the quick book out, the free from the hand, that this would be sort of a way of really speeding up the game. Because
so instead of cutting it off the ground, you could lift and strike it
inside your own 45.
Inside your own 45 only.
We took 45 because again it couldn't be scored.
Yes.
It was indirect, and the 45
would have a good impact.
Yeah, and the 45 metre line is marked in Camogie. 65 isn't, you see, so 45 is a definite line.
And they didn't take that one on.
I didn't take that one on board because I said sideline and skill. And I've 2 nieces who play Camogie, and I watch all their games, or as many as I can. And one girl played under 16 this year, and the other at minor. And you'd be just fearful when you see a 45 or a sideline side, because you know it's going to develop into a ruck, and it's going to lead to this thing that's
because they're not striking them the same length as
and because
the same distances.
Everyone attacks the sideline when it's coming out of defence, because they know they have an advantage.
Right,
they can get a score from it. The other thing we did in tandem with that, we did 2 things. We wanted 2 things done to throw in. Now the group filtering our suggestions said that the throw-in, we suggested on the throw-in that it should be a 3 metre exclusion zone, only 2 players, and if anybody encroached, it would be an indirect free against them.
Yeah.
This is the stop, this melee that leads to
the
another
rucking,
melee.
the rucking, because I do think rucking, because
it adds nothing to the game.
Well, but also players are so fit and strong now. There's more rucking in the game than ever before because people are so fast to the ball. But there is a lot of rucking holding up the game, Kate, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
And so their suggestion was, if there's a ruck, it should be a throw-in. Blow it quickly and give a throw-in. In basketball, for example, I saw basketball rules change over the years. In basketball, remember, 2 players of any kind would end up grabbing the ball. There would be a throw-in. But they decided after a long time that was just too slow. And so what they do in basketball is they alternate who gets the free from the sideline. It's very simple. So if we end up fighting over a ball, whoever had the free the last time, they'll just get it the next time. I think that rule could work in a rucking situation. But their idea was to throw the ball up, because there are a lot of rucks in the game now.
No, and that's actually quite an interesting. And as you say, it would have added to the quick puck out and the free from the hand out of backs, and definitely at underage, I think that would be a very welcome addition to the rules.
Yeah, so they didn't take up on that one.
Well, it says that the throw-in situation is provided for in rules, and it's only referee education. So we'll see how that works out.
Right. Okay.
What we want to do is stop the game being held up.
I think they let the rucks go on too long, you see. That's my thing. Because you can throw it in off a ruck, but they tend to let them go and go and go and go.
And what's happening to Cliona is that it's not adding to the game of hurling either.
No, it's not in the men's game either. And also there's consistency, Chloe. Some refs will blow it very quickly in a ruck and some won't.
That's it, yeah. That would have been, I think that is a very good rule. It just would have been hard to, again, like for a referee to tell her to keep them back, because if she's in front of me, I have to get in front of her, and that's how it happens. But it is. I think that is quite a good idea.
The other players have to stay away.
Yeah.
So and the indirect free would stop it very quickly, because an indirect
the
free.
encroach, you see, is when you're trying to
get
the sideline and the hitting it out of hand. Like I get the point in trying to speed up 100%. It's a very good rationale. It's just, I suppose my opinion of it would be, like, if we have a sideline for 2 points, and we're trying to get girls maybe
to encourage them to get better at it.
Yeah, like we should be trying to get them to a standard rather than probably, but not the I'm not saying the standard will come down, but if you want them to take more sidelines, score more, then keep the sideline
at any part of the pitch, even if it was in the 45.
We discussed that, but it's a different girl, different players has taken the one from centre field.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So we haven't taken the skill out of the game.
Or encouraging the forwards to get good at it.
100 metres where you still do that.
You can still do it.
It's just that the sideline, we felt the sideline inside your own 45 disadvantages the back and doesn't add anything to speed up the game, considering we had taken the puck out and the free from the hand as two measures already to speed it up.
Interesting.
This was in line with it, we thought. Now, they may try it later on, or it doesn't stop. The fact it's not being tried now doesn't mean that it wouldn't come in as a suggestion or a motion for the Congress.
In future. Because technically these will be trialled in this year's National League, but you wouldn't be talking about introducing them. They have to go to Congress, and it would be 2021 that they would come in. So it's a long space there. There is a space. My worry about it all is that they weren't announced that long ago, and the National League is starting in February, and I worry, there's two worries I'd have, I suppose. I don't know how you feel about them. One is, have referees long enough to learn them, and two, have players long enough to learn them, Kate?
I think from a player's point of view, definitely you'd be at training, and Chloe, maybe you'd come in on this, but I definitely think you'd get the new rules and you'd be happy to trial them and put them in your training, and you'd nearly be excited about those changes. I definitely think they allude to the game being quicker, to being clever, to smart thinking, being sharp,
Kate,
being aware.
Again. I'm going to take Kate out of retirement. Nobody in the country wants that unless you're in Wexford. But that's interesting. Yeah, so you just think they'd love them. Do you have enough time?
Yeah, like I was only bringing those questions, Liam, because we actually just didn't know. We just wanted some clarity on them, I suppose. I don't know, this could be a totally ridiculous idea, but like we were talking to some of us, and maybe would it be a good idea to have a video demo and send it out, and this is what minimum contact, this is what this is, or even graphics. I think when the hand pass rule was brought in for football, they actually had graphics and things like that, but like as Kate said, the players are really eager to try them out. There's actually some of our players who are actually going back playing Ashburn the next day after trialling the rules, and they're getting a bit mixed up sometimes between them. So
yeah, that's a confusing area, all right, if you're playing colleges and they don't apply to that, but the men's side has had that in recent years as well, where it didn't apply, and it won't affect championship next year. So look, it's all out there. A couple of last questions. Did Scorts come up in all those 1,500 questionnaires? Don't mention the S word.
We thought, look, that's something that can be done. It was a discussion for a different group.
Right.
And the majority of players, and I think all our players on the committee, were happy with Scorts.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I get players all the time saying, "Give it them."
Younger ones.
Maybe is that? Do you think?
But they felt that it was feminine, it was unique to Camogie in the Gaelic Games world, and they felt that that there was something good about it and something attractive about it in the sense that they were different.
It's different, makes them different.
Yeah, and I think that's
I agree. Yeah,
You
and
feel
I think
like
it's evolved. Like the skirt in itself,
it is a
evolved
short
in terms
with a skirt over it.
It's a nicer it's more comfortable now than before. We were wearing a wraparound and you were wearing culottes and you were wearing shorts underneath. And, you know, I think it has evolved that I think girls are genuinely happier now to.
What about you,
wear
Clare?
them.
Well, I don't know about the feminine rationale. Like, that wouldn't be like maybe for younger girls, but like, I mean, camogie is camogie. Like, it's sport, so I wouldn't really. Like,
I would say most
most
athletes wear
like
shorts.
it doesn't bother me to wear skirt shorts, but I do know that there are girls who absolutely despise skirts. But like, I don't know if it's possible maybe to allow them a player to pick, but I don't know. Then you'd have someone in shorts, you'd have someone in skirts.
Would look a bit strange, I suppose. Yeah, it's an interesting one, but it does seem to come up a lot in discussions that I have with players. The one I can't stand is goalkeepers wearing the same jersey, which is still the same rule that all players wear the same jersey. It doesn't make any sense to me. As a forward, you should be able to identify the one who has the bigger boss. If there's a melee in the goal mouth, you should, and also even with penalties, as a journalist, we could never figure out who made the save, and it hasn't been changed at all. But look, this is a start, you know, and that's the important thing I think here. Camogie Association has in recent years got criticism because the interpretation was that they were too conservative, they weren't willing for change. The All-Ireland finals of recent years, not this year's, which was an amazing final, but the previous two were very low scoring. Would we change the rules? How would we change the rules? How could we make this a quicker, more attractive game to play, to give the incentive to people to be attacking? So you have to say hands up to Camogie for starting this process, Liam, but it is the start of it, right? We did hear, I get feedback from players. I heard from players in recent years that they were told, don't be criticising the game and don't be criticising the rules. You know, you'll give Camogie a bad reputation and, you know, it's not good for sponsors. And off the bench, we say, speak out, players, because how else are we going to get change? Players lead change, and you know, there's so much leadership now. We talk about leadership in women's sport, how important that is. So good on the players for complaining, good on the Camogie for listening. But there's a long way to go, Liam, and I'll leave you with the last word on this one.
We'd like to think this is the start of a process. I mean, the Camogie has potential. It's a growing sport. They all talk about ladies football being the fastest growing sport, but actually I've never seen as many girls pucking around the ball at half times before match. They bring their commands and their sitters to games the same as the boys do. Right. There's a huge take up in Camogie, and maybe it's just in Laois, I don't know, but really it's unbelievable the number of girls now who are interested in the game. What we want to do is say our message to Camogie was, this is a game that has huge potential, and what about it if Camogie goes ahead of hurling? If that's what happens in the game, it's a thinking person's game. If these are adopted, we will feel this will be a thinking person games. It'll be very good for people who are innovative, and I think if we take on board some of these changes, the Camogie players themselves will see potential for more. But the message is, as you said, we're prepared to listen, and the Camogie Association asked us to get involved in this. They're prepared to listen, and I think the players will have a stronger voice out of it, and they'll be encouraged. I hope this process will encourage them to suggest further changes. Yeah, and I think that will happen. I think that's the great thing, and the WGPA has been a big part of that, and both of you have been involved in WGPA in asking for change, not for change's sake, but to make the game better and to keep more women and bring more girls into the game as well. So look, let's see what happens. It's going to be an interesting year. 2020 is going to be a great year sports-wise for women's sport anyway, and let's see how we get on with this. I, for one, like you, are very excited about it. Thanks to all of the three of you for coming in. Thanks to Emma Carl outside for doing the production. Again, you can get us, all our previous podcasts are on iTunes, are on offtheball.com in the podcast section. It's our last one before Christmas, but we will be involved in a big way in Off the Ball's January 5th. We did it last year, we're doing it again. 5 hours of live women's sport on January the 5th to celebrate Nullig Namond. So we will be back to you and we'll be talking to you then. And so until then, thanks for listening and happy Christmas, everyone. A couple of weeks ago on this show, we hosted a Saturday panel with the Government of Ireland's No Excuse campaign. Nathan Murphy was joined by Cliona Sadler of the Rape Crisis Centre, Chelsea women's football coach Lisa Fallon and former Wexford hurler Dermot Ling to discuss sexual harassment and locker room talk in sport. Despite it affecting so many, research shows that only half of us are clear about what constitutes sexual violence or abuse. It can happen to anyone of any gender, race, age, sexual orientation or religion. Irish research shows 42% of women and 28% of men experience some form of sexual abuse or assault in their lifetime. Enough is enough.
Let's stop excusing sexual harassment and sexual violence. Enough is enough. Let's stop excusing sexual harassment and sexual violence. Learn more at government.ie/no excuses, or if ever in an emergency, call 999. Here's a clip of that panel.
It definitely changed, and it's such as I'm jogging through it, Nathan, there's different. It changed very much for the positive in some respects, in that the younger lads who came in were a product of the internet generation, who had this open access to information in a way that we wouldn't have had as young people. So they brought in a fresh set of ideas and a fresh way of looking at the world. I mean, I think there's no secret that porn has also played a huge part in that as well, and that's been a part of the internet revolution, in the privatisation and the locking of that away into little small cells of bedrooms and privacy. And so that obviously had an effect as well, but I don't know how much is... I look back at some of the fellas who I started with, and they were good men. They were good, strong men, you know, and they weren't closed down in their manhood. It wasn't that they were stoic and stunted. They were just good, strong men. And when I was leaving, I felt that the cult of I had taken over the dressing room a little bit more. It was a little bit more about the how it looked and how it was to be one of the county players. That didn't seem to be there, to me at least, at the start. Now, I don't know that I go on that change, and I was observing it then in other people as a reflection. I couldn't tell you, but as far as I could observe, it got locked down more into the mirror muscles, high performance, this kind of physical prowess that was sometimes not related to the game at all. It just seemed to be this thing that you wanted to do I don't know, I didn't really understand it, why they wanted to do it, because to me everything was to forward the game. So it went on there was significant changes, but I couldn't say in relation to that, like, it definitely triggers a bit of, I don't know, healthy, I feel, defensiveness in me in the conversation as a man too, where sometimes I think there can be in sports dressing rooms, maybe male dominated. I'm sure Lisa can talk more about the female dressing rooms, but that this culture, this kind of men just jostling for position, kind of the older generation, who said that's just the way young fellas are. And sometimes I think that proliferates very, very quickly into, well, they're the early signs. That's like the gateway drug. He's going to go from smoking a joint to taking heroin now very, very quickly. That's this is this culture of macho talk, and all of a sudden he's going to be assaulting somebody and sexually assaulting somebody. And I think there's a huge part in the middle of that, and I think we lose in that conversation very, very quickly. We lose a lot of men who are just like, I can't even listen to that conversation of someone telling me that because I take part in this, which is actually an affirmation in some respects of the dynamic between men, that's all of a sudden an attack on women. It's far too much for them to process. And I think, and I see why, you know.